The crack of the whip echoed across the dusty town square of Redemption, Texas, silencing every whisper and freezing every passerby in their tracks. Primrose Lawson bit down hard on her lip until she tasted blood, determined not to cry out as the leather cut across her back for the third time. The year was 1875, and in this corner of the West, a woman's opinion was worth less than the dirt beneath their boots, especially when voiced against the town's most powerful man. "Let that be a lesson to you and any other woman who forgets her place," Mayor Harold Jenkins announced to the gathered crowd, his voice carrying on the hot summer wind. "This one thought she could challenge my business dealings at the town meeting. Thought she knew better than men how to run things." Primrose's dress hung in tatters around her shoulders, blood seeping through the once pristine fabric. Her honey blonde hair had fallen from its careful arrangement, strands sticking to her sweat-dampened face. At 23, she'd already endured more hardship than most, orphaned at 16 and left to fend for herself in a world that saw her as little more than property to be claimed. "You can beat me bloody," she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady despite the pain radiating through her body, "but that won't make your thieving right. Those homesteaders paid for water rights you sold twice over." The mayor's face twisted with rage. "One more word from you, that's enough." The deep voice cut through the tension like a knife. The crowd parted as a tall figure moved forward, spurs jingling with each deliberate step. Quincy James stood over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders casting a shadow across Primrose's battered form. His face was partially hidden beneath the wide brim of his Stetson, but everyone could see the dangerous glint in his steel-gray eyes. "Cut her down," Quincy commanded, hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. The sheriff, a weak man who'd long ago fallen under the mayor's influence, hesitated. "Now see here, James, this is official town business," I said, Quincy repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "Cut her down." Something in his tone made the sheriff scramble to comply. As Primrose's bound wrists were freed from the whipping post, her legs buckled beneath her. Quincy moved with surprising grace for such a large man, catching her before she hit the ground. "You're interfering with justice, James," Mayor Jenkins sputtered, his face purpling with rage. Quincy's expression remained impassive as he gathered Primrose carefully in his arms. "No, I'm preventing murder." His eyes swept over the gathered crowd. "You all stood and watched this. Remember that tonight when you say your prayers." He turned to Primrose, his voice softening just enough for her to hear. "You've said your piece, fought your fight, but you'll never bow to them again, not while I draw breath." Primrose, dizzy from pain and blood loss, could only stare up at the face of the man holding her. She'd seen him around town since he'd arrived 3 months ago, but they'd never spoken. He kept to himself, taking odd jobs and drinking alone at the saloon, the mysterious cowboy with the scarred hands and watchful eyes. "Why?" she managed to whisper. "Later," he replied, striding toward his horse. "Right now, we need to tend to your back." Mayor Jenkins stepped forward. "If you take her, James, don't bother coming back to Redemption. You'll be as unwelcome as she is." Quincy paused, turning his head just enough to fix the mayor with a look that made the older man take an involuntary step backward. "Sounds like a fair trade to me." With practiced ease, he mounted his horse, cradling Primrose against his chest, and urged the animal forward, leaving a cloud of dust and a stunned silence behind them. The pain in Primrose's back was becoming unbearable, each movement of the horse sending fresh waves of agony through her body. She tried to focus on the steady rhythm of Quincy's heartbeat against her cheek, the solid strength of his arms around her. "Not much further," he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "I've got a cabin about 2 miles out. You'll be safe there." Primrose wanted to respond, to ask the 1,000 questions spinning through her mind, but darkness was closing in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she remembered was the gentle pressure of his hand steadying her as the world faded to black. When Primrose awoke, the first thing she noticed was that she was lying on her stomach on a surprisingly comfortable bed. The second was that she was wearing only a thin cotton shift, her back exposed to the cool air. Panic flared through her as she tried to push herself up. Easy, came that same deep voice from earlier. You'll tear the stitches. Primrose turned her head to see Quincy sitting on a wooden chair beside the bed, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing corded forearms tanned by the sun. A bowl of water tinged pink with her blood sat on a small table next to him. You stitched my back, she asked, her throat dry and scratchy. He nodded, reaching for a cup of water and helping her drink. Had plenty of practice patching up wounds during the war. Yours aren't as bad as they could have been, but they'll leave scars. Better scars than submission, she said, wincing as she shifted. Thank you for what you did, though I don't understand why. Quincy was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. No decent man stands by watching a woman being beaten for speaking truth. He stood, moving to stoke the small fire in the stone hearth. Rest. We'll talk more when you're stronger. Over the next few days, as Primrose recovered, she learned more about the quiet, serious man who had saved her. Quincy James had fought for the Union, returning home to Illinois to find his family farm seized for taxes while he was away. He'd been drifting ever since, taking work where he could find it, never staying in one place too long. What brought you to redemption? She asked one evening as they shared a simple supper of rabbit stew. Heard they needed hands at the Harrison Ranch, he replied, breaking off a piece of cornbread. Worked there until 2 weeks ago when old man Harrison sold out to Jenkins. Primrose's eyes widened. That's what I was protesting at the meeting. Jenkins has been buying up all the water rights and charging impossible prices. The small farmers can't survive. Quincy nodded. I noticed. Didn't seem right, but most places have their own version of Jenkins. Wasn't planning to get involved until I saw what they were doing to you. And now you've made an enemy of the most powerful man in the county, she said quietly. For a stranger, his gray eyes met hers across the table. You're not a stranger anymore, Primrose. Something warm unfurled in her chest at his words, at the way her name sounded in his deep voice. For the first time since the whipping, she felt something beyond pain and anger, something that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks grow warm. As the days passed, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Quincy would rise before dawn to hunt or tend to his small garden, while Primrose, as her strength returned, took over cooking and keeping the cabin in order. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes in companionable silence. Primrose learned that, beneath his stoic exterior, Quincy was thoughtful and intelligent, with strong opinions but a willingness to listen that she found refreshingly different from most men she'd known. She told him about growing up as the daughter of a schoolteacher father who had encouraged her to read and think for herself, and a mother who had taught her to stand by her convictions, no matter the cost. They died in a fever outbreak when I was 16, she explained one night. I've been on my own since then, teaching at the school and taking in sewing to make ends meet. You're brave, Quincy said simply. Braver than most men I've known. Not brave, she corrected him, just stubborn. My mother always said I got that from my father. She smiled at the memory, then sobered. I had a life in redemption, Quincy, a small house my parents left me, my students, I can't hide out here forever. You're not going back, he said firmly, his jaw tightening. Jenkins won't forget what happened, he'll make an example of you. So I just give up everything I've worked for, she challenged, feeling a flare of the same indignation that had gotten her whipped in the first place. Let him win, Quincy stared into the fire for a long moment. There are other towns, other places where a woman with your skills would be welcome. We could, he stopped abruptly, as if realizing what he was about to suggest. We, Primrose asked softly. He met her gaze, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. If you wanted, I've been thinking it's time to stop drifting, maybe put down roots somewhere. The idea of starting fresh somewhere with this man who had saved her, who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness, made Primrose's heart race. But before she could respond, a sound outside made them both freeze, the unmistakable approach of horses. Quincy was on his feet in an instant, grabbing his rifle from above the door. Stay back, he ordered, his voice tight with tension. A moment later, a heavy fist pounded on the door. James, we know you're in there. The mayor wants a word with the girl. Primrose's blood ran cold. She recognized the voice. It belonged to Tom Decker, the mayor's right-hand man and the one who had wielded the whip against her. Quincy positioned himself between her and the door. "There's no girl here, Decker. Ride on." Harsh laughter came from outside. "Don't play dumb, James." "We followed the blood trail that day. Been biding our time, waiting for the mayor to give the word. He's real upset about how you embarrassed him in front of the whole town." Primrose moved to Quincy's side, her heart pounding. "There are at least 3 of them," she whispered, having caught glimpses through the cabin's small window. "Get your things," Quincy murmured. "There's a trapdoor under the rug in the bedroom, root cellar below. If this goes bad, you get yourself out the back way." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted. The pounding came again. "Last chance, James. Send her out or we burn this place to the ground with both of you in it." Quincy's expression hardened. "When I open the door, get behind it," he told Primrose, checking his revolver. "Ready." She nodded, fear and determination warring within her. Quincy moved to the door, counted silently to 3, then yanked it open, immediately diving to the side as gunfire erupted. Primrose pressed herself against the wall behind the door, heart hammering in her chest. The next few minutes were chaos, shouting, more gunshots, the sound of breaking glass as a lantern crashed through the window. Smoke began to fill the cabin as the kerosene ignited the dry wooden floor. "Primrose," Quincy's voice called out through the haze. "Get to the cellar." She could barely see him through the thickening smoke, but she could make out his form grappling with one of Jenkins' men near the overturned table. The roof beams were beginning to crackle ominously as the fire spread. "Not without you," she cried, grabbing a cast iron pan from the stove and bringing it down hard on the head of the man Quincy was fighting. The man crumpled, and Quincy stared at her in momentary surprise before another figure loomed in the doorway. Tom Decker stood silhouetted against the night, a cruel smile on his face and a revolver pointed at Quincy's chest. "The mayor sends his regards," he drawled. Time seemed to slow as Decker's finger tightened on the trigger. Without thinking, Primrose threw herself forward, shoving Quincy aside just as the gun fired. A searing pain exploded in her shoulder, spinning her around and dropping her to the floor. "Primrose." Quincy's anguished cry seemed to come from very far away. Through a haze of pain, she saw him lunge at Decker, the 2 men crashing out the door and into the yard beyond. The fire was spreading rapidly now, the heat intense and the smoke choking. Primrose tried to push herself up, but her injured arm wouldn't support her weight. The room swam before her eyes as she fought to stay conscious. Suddenly, strong arms were lifting her, carrying her out into the cool night air. Quincy's face swam into focus above her, streaked with soot and blood, his eyes wild with worry. "Hold on," he urged, laying her gently on the grass a safe distance from the burning cabin. "Just hold on." The world faded in and out as Quincy worked to stem the bleeding from her shoulder. She caught glimpses of the night sky above, of the 3 bodies lying motionless in the yard, of Quincy's face, fierce with concentration as he tended to her wound. "Why did you do that?" he demanded, his voice rough with emotion. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Despite the pain, Primrose managed a small smile. "Same reason you did for me, I expect." His hands stilled on her bandaged shoulder, his eyes searching hers. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a recognition. Slowly, he leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her face. "Don't you dare die on me, Primrose Lawson," he whispered. "Not when I'm just finding reasons to live again." She reached up with her good hand, touching his cheek. "I'm stronger than I look, Quincy James." The cabin collapsed behind them in a shower of sparks and flames, illuminating the night with an orange glow. With it went all of Quincy's few possessions, the simple life he had carved out for himself. "We need to move," he said eventually, helping her to sit up. "Jenkins will send more men when these don't return." "Where will we go?" she asked, leaning against him as a wave of dizziness washed over her. Quincy looked toward the horizon, where the first hint of dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. "West, as far as we need to." He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. "Can you ride?" "If it means getting away from here, I can do anything," she said with more confidence than she felt. By sunrise, they were miles away from the burned-out cabin, Primrose seated in front of Quincy on his horse, his arms around her to keep her steady. Her shoulder throbbed with every movement, but she refused to complain. They had survived, that was what mattered. They rode for 3 days, stopping only when absolutely necessary, pushing on despite exhaustion and pain. Quincy was constantly vigilant, his hand never far from his gun, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs of pursuit. They avoided towns and main trails, keeping to less traveled paths that Quincy seemed to know instinctively. On the 4th day, they crested a hill to find a small valley spread out below them, a winding river cutting through the center, stands of cottonwoods providing shade, and in the distance, the peaks of mountains rising against the sky. Wyoming territory, Quincy said, reining in the horse. Used to be Shoshone land before the treaties. Beautiful country. It is, Primrose agreed, taking in the sweeping vista. After days of hard travel, the peaceful scene before them seemed almost unreal. They made camp by the river that night, both too exhausted to go further. Quincy carefully changed the bandage on Primrose's shoulder, his expression grim as he examined the wound. It's healing, he told her, but we need to find a real doctor soon. She nodded, leaning back against a tree trunk. Quincy, what happens now? We can't run forever. He sat beside her, his shoulder just touching hers. There's a settlement about a day's ride from here, Stillwater. It's a new place, mostly miners and homesteaders. They're building it up from nothing. He hesitated. I heard they need a school teacher. Primrose turned to look at him, hope flaring in her chest. And what would you do in Stillwater? Whatever needs doing, he said with a shrug. I can ranch, build, hunt. Been thinking maybe it's time to try my hand at something more permanent. His eyes met hers. If you'd want to stay, that is. With you? She asked softly. Quincy's usually stoic expression wavered, uncertainty and something deeper, warmer, showing through. Primrose, I know we haven't known each other long, and I'm not a man of many words, but… She waited, heart pounding, as he struggled to articulate what was growing between them. I never expected to find someone like you, he finally said. Never thought I'd want to stop wandering, but these past weeks, even with everything that's happened, I've felt more alive, more purposeful than I have since before the war. Primrose reached out, taking his scarred hand in hers. I feel it too, she admitted. When you stood up for me in redemption when no one else would, you saw me, really saw me. Not as a woman who needed to be put in her place, but as a person worth defending. You are worth defending, he said firmly, worth following, worth. He trailed off, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. Worth loving, she whispered. His gaze locked with hers, intense and unwavering. Yes. The simple word hung in the air between them, pregnant with meaning and promise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Quincy leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepening as Primrose responded, her good arm sliding around his neck to draw him closer. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Quincy rested his forehead against hers. I'm not a wealthy man, he warned. Can't offer you much besides hard work and loyalty. Those are worth more than gold to me, she assured him. And you've already given me the most precious thing, freedom to be who I am, to speak my mind without fear. The next morning, they set out for Stillwater, a new lightness between them despite their uncertain future. As they rode, Quincy told Primrose more about the settlement, how it had been founded just 3 years earlier by a group of families looking to make their own way far from established authority. No mayor, she asked with a small smile. No mayor, he confirmed. They have a town council, men and women both, make decisions together. The idea of such a place, where a woman might have an equal voice, seemed almost too good to be true to Primrose. Yet as they rode into Stillwater late the next day, she began to believe it might be possible. The town was small but bustling with activity, a single main street lined with wooden buildings in various stages of completion. Wagons loaded with lumber rolling past, children playing in front of a modest church, women and men working side by side to raise a barn at the edge of town. They stopped first at the doctor's house, where a kindly older man named Dr. Peterson examined Primrose's shoulder with professional efficiency. Bullet went clean through, he pronounced. You're lucky no fragments, no major damage. Keep it clean and rested, and you should recover full use of the arm. As he rebandaged the wound, his wife Martha brought them tea and asked their story. Quincy, still cautious, gave a simplified version that they had been forced to leave their previous home due to corrupt local officials and were looking for a fresh start. Martha and the doctor exchanged a knowing look. You wouldn't be the first to come to Stillwater for similar reasons, Martha said. This town was founded by people who wanted to build something better than what they'd left behind. We heard you might need a school teacher, Primrose ventured. Martha's face lit up. Oh my, do we ever. We've got 28 children of school age and have been taking turns teaching them ourselves, but none of us has proper training. Miss Lawson was the teacher in our previous town, Quincy said, a note of pride in his voice. Taught children of all ages. And you, Mr. James, doctor. Peterson asked, what skills do you bring? I can work with horses, build, farm, whatever's needed, Quincy replied simply. By the end of the week, Primrose had been officially hired as Stillwater's schoolteacher with a small cabin provided as part of her compensation. Quincy found work at the livery stable, where his way with difficult horses quickly earned him respect. They settled into their new lives with a sense of cautious optimism. Primrose threw herself into establishing a proper school, working with parents to develop lessons that would prepare their children for life on the frontier. Quincy's quiet competence and fairness made him a valued member of the community, and he was soon asked to join the town council. For the first month, they maintained separate residences, though they spent most evenings together, planning, dreaming, learning each other's hearts and minds. Their growing relationship did not go unnoticed in the small town, but rather than disapproval, they found support and acceptance. You two make a good match, Martha Peterson told Primrose one Sunday after church. He watches you when you speak, really listens. Not enough men do that. He's a rare man, Primrose agreed, glancing across the churchyard to where Quincy stood talking with some of the other men, his tall figure easy to spot in any crowd. As spring turned to summer, their love deepened, transforming from the intense connection forged in crisis to something more substantial, a partnership built on mutual respect and growing affection. Quincy remained a man of few words, but Primrose came to understand his silent ways, to read the emotions in his eyes that he struggled to express. One evening in late July, he took her riding up to a ridge overlooking the valley where Stillwater nestled like a jewel amid the wilderness. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I have something to show you, he said, helping her down from her horse and leading her to a clearing among the pines. Primrose gasped when she saw at the beginnings of a house, the foundation laid and the frame starting to rise against the backdrop of the mountains. Quincy, she breathed, turning to him in surprise. What is this, our place, he said simply. If you want it to be. He took her hands in his. I've been working on it in the evenings with help from some of the men in town. It's not much yet, but it will be solid. Big enough for a family, eventually. Tears filled Primrose's eyes as she understood what he was asking. Are you proposing to me, Quincy James? A rare, full smile transformed his usually serious face. Trying to, he admitted. Not doing a very good job of it, am I? Laughing through her tears, she shook her head. Actually, I think it's perfect. He dropped to one knee then, still holding her hands. Primrose Lawson, I've seen your courage, your kindness, your fierce heart. I love you more than I thought possible. Will you marry me, build a life with me here? Yes, she answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. He stood and gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. As they broke apart, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. It was my mother's, he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. The only thing I have left of her. She was a strong woman too, would have liked you. Primrose touched the ring reverently. I'll wear it with pride, Quincy. They were married 2 weeks later in the Stillwater church, the entire town turning out to celebrate. Primrose wore a new blue dress that the women of the town had helped her make, with a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Quincy, usually so comfortable in his worn trail clothes, looked almost boyishly nervous in a new shirt and string tie. The town threw them a proper celebration, with music and dancing continuing well into the night. As Quincy led Primrose in a dance under the stars, she marveled at how far they had come from that terrible day in Redemption's town square. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked him, gesturing to the laughing, welcoming community around them. "When you cut me down from that post," he shook his head, pulling her closer. "All I knew then was that I couldn't stand by and watch them break you. Didn't know you'd end up saving me right back." "We saved each other," she corrected him, "and we'll keep doing that every day." Their house on the ridge was finished by autumn, just before the first snows. It was everything Primrose could have wished for, sturdy and well-built, with large windows that looked out over the valley, a stone fireplace that kept the main room cozy, and enough space for the family they both hoped to have. Quincy continued to work at the livery, eventually buying into the business when the owner decided to move further west. Primrose's school flourished, and as Stillwater grew, so did the number of her students. She never forgot the lesson of redemption, though, and made sure to teach both boys and girls to think for themselves, to question authority when necessary, and to stand up for what was right. Their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor after Primrose's mother, was born the following summer, with Martha Peterson serving as midwife. Quincy paced outside for hours, then nearly collapsed with relief when he was finally allowed in to see his wife and new daughter. "She has your eyes," Primrose told him as he cradled the tiny bundle, his large hands suddenly impossibly gentle, "and your serious expression." "Poor child," he joked, but his face was transformed with wonder as little Eleanor wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. "She's perfect, Primrose. Just like her mother." As the years passed, their family grew. Eleanor was joined by a brother, Daniel, and later by twin girls, Sarah and Rebecca. Their home rang with children's laughter. With music from the piano, Quincy surprised Primrose with on their 5th anniversary, with the sounds of a happy, thriving family. Stillwater grew too, becoming a proper town with a railroad station, several stores, and even a small newspaper that Primrose occasionally wrote articles for. Through it all, she and Quincy remained pillars of the community, respected for their fairness, their hard work, and their unwavering commitment to making Stillwater a place where everyone, regardless of gender, race, or background, could have a voice. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep, they would sit on their porch overlooking the town, Primrose's head resting on Quincy's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "You ever think about redemption?" she asked him once. "Wonder what happened to Jenkins and the others?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "Heard from a traveler last year that Jenkins finally went too far, tried to cheat some government men out of land and ended up in prison." He kissed the top of her head. "Justice has a way of finding people eventually." "I should hate him, I suppose," Primrose mused. "For what he did to me." "But you don't," she shook her head. "No, in a strange way, I'm almost grateful. If not for that day, we might never have found each other. Never found this place, this life." Quincy turned to face her, taking her hands in his as he had on the day he proposed. The years had added silver to his hair and lines around his eyes, but his gaze was still clear and steady as it met hers. "You know, that day in Redemption when I told you that you'd never bow again, I meant it as a promise to protect you," he said. "But you never needed my protection, not really. You've always had your own strength. We're stronger together," she told him, leaning forward to brush her lips against his. "Always have been." On their 20th anniversary, the town of Stillwater threw them a celebration reminiscent of their wedding day. Their children, now nearly grown, organized the event with help from the many friends Quincy and Primrose had made over the years. As they stood together receiving congratulations and well wishes, Eleanor, now a poised young woman of 19 with her father's quiet strength and her mother's outspoken intelligence, presented them with a gift from the entire town, a bronze plaque to be mounted on the schoolhouse, dedicating it in their honor. "For teaching us all that courage means speaking truth, even when your voice shakes," Eleanor read from the inscription. And that love means standing beside those who dare to speak. Tears filled Primrose's eyes as she embraced her daughter. "Thank you," she whispered. Later, as they danced under the same stars that had witnessed their wedding 2 decades earlier, Quincy held her close. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Primrose looked around at the thriving town they had helped build, at their beautiful children laughing with friends, at the life they had created together from the ashes of violence and injustice. "Not a single one," she answered truthfully. "Every lash was worth it to find my way to you." Quincy's eyes, still keen despite the years, held the same devotion they had shown on that first desperate day. "I told you then you'd never bow again," he reminded her, "but I think I was wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You never bowed in the first place," he said. "You stood tall, even tied to that post. It was the rest of us who had to rise to meet you." Primrose smiled up at the man who had saved her, whom she had saved in return, the love of her life who had helped her build something beautiful from pain and loss. "We rose together," she said. "And we're still rising." As the music played on and the stars wheeled overhead, they continued their dance. Two people who had found in each other not just love, but the courage to stand against injustice, the strength to build something new, and the wisdom to know that true freedom comes not from never bowing, but from choosing when, how, and to whom to bend. In the years that followed, as their children grew and left to make their own way in the world, as Stillwater continued to prosper, as they welcomed grandchildren and watched a new generation learn the values they had fought so hard to uphold, Primrose and Quincy remained each other's steadfast companions, their love deepening with each passing season. And sometimes, when visitors to town asked how Stillwater had become such a place of equality and fairness, someone would tell the story of a brave woman who was once whipped for speaking her mind, and the cowboy who vowed she would never bow again, and how together, they had helped build a community where everyone's voice mattered, where justice meant more than power, and where love was the strongest foundation of all.